Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, QT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Thursday. It doesn't exactly feel like a Thursday, it actually feels more like a Monday because we're just coming off of the 4th of July holiday, so hopefully everybody had a safe and happy holiday and did not blow yourselves up because that would be very, very unfortunate. I had a good night last night. To spend time with the family and all that stuff, so all that good stuff. So again, hopefully everybody had a safe and happy holiday. And now we're back, and we've got a mix of disastrous stories and basically disastrous stories. So, I mean, for example, we're going to be talking about... we have an update, by the way, on a story that we did a couple of days ago. About Walmart. That's an interesting story. Then we have a poll that's fairly disastrous for Donald Trump and Republicans in general. We have a Charlottesville Nazi outed by ProPublica. We're going to get into the details about that guy. We also have Pfizer on the price of medications, raising your prices once again. We have a horrific indictment of the healthcare system here in America. That story is very interesting as well. So we're going to talk about that. And American flags made in China. But first, of course, we've got really sad news. Ed Schultz. So we'll start out with that. But before we do, please give us a like and share if you haven't already. Sharing is caring. It's one of the most important ways that you can help is get the stream out. Other ways that you can help is to go through the Super Chat and leave us a message using the Super Chat, and I'll read those on the air. Or you can go and become a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. Okay. So, that said... let's go with sad and disastrous news. Here we go. So we have some breaking news that is incredibly sad. Longtime broadcaster Ed Schultz has passed away at the age of 64. So, of course... he died quietly at home earlier today of natural causes. We're not sure what the details are on that, but nonetheless, it's a pretty devastating loss for the progressive community. I mean, where I know Ed Schultz from, and he's had a career long before I've ever heard of him, MSNBC. So he worked at MSNBC for quite some time, also worked at RT, and was a... radio host in Fargo in the early 1980s, including times as a sports director at WDAY. So he had a very long and very excellent career. He's been a champion of of the causes of regular working people. For example, he's been very, very pro-union. Which, being a union guy myself, that was always great. It was always great to get his perspective on issues when it comes to workers. In fact, he's always championed working class and as I said before, labor unions. And, one thing that he always did is he always made sure that people who were speaking for the working class had a platform on his show, that he would go out and he would find progressives, working class people, and he would highlight their issues. And he would highlight their issues on the picket lines. And so, the working class has lost a big hero today. And one of the things that I remember Schultz for is always bringing on at the time, a little known senator from Vermont to talk about these issues. Of course, that was Bernie Sanders. He's one of the only hosts on television that would talk about Bernie Sanders, and that would, have him on his show. In fact, during the election, he was one of Sanders' biggest supporters and one of his only supporters on cable news. So this is somebody who gave a platform, a progressive who gave a platform to other progressives on a network that was center at best. That is, of course, until he ended up getting fired from MSNBC over his stance. Well, a lot of people believe that it was over his stance on the Trans-Pacific Partnership during the Obama administration. As I said before, being somebody who is pro-worker, TPP was something that is incredibly anti-worker. And he made sure that everybody knew it. Again, he was the only person on MSNBC who was talking about how bad of a deal it was for workers if we adopted the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So it just brings me back to where before I got into politics, before I got into broadcasting, I had watched, Ed was probably one of the first people that I had watched on MSNBC. So he had a show at 5 o'clock, and I would watch him, his show, and hear him talking about working class issues. And it's one of the first times I got exposed to Bernie Sanders. And I was like, I like what that guy is saying. And then afterwards, it was Politics Hour with Cenk Uygur. So that was the MSNBC lineup, and so that's how I got involved. And I started watching Ed, and then I started watching Cenk, and then when Cenk left MSNBC, I followed him to the Young Turks. So I mean, both of them are huge, amazing progressives. And the loss of Ed is a big blow to the progressive community. But I didn't agree with him on everything and every single issue. And I've called him out on his video games causing violence and stuff like that. But no, when it came to working class issues, Ed was a friend of the working class, and he was a friend of the middle class. And there's a lot of people that are going to miss him. Myself included, in his voice. In fact, one of the last things that I covered that he talked about is how Phil Griffin, when he was working at MSNBC, had intentionally sidelined coverage of Bernie Sanders. And so that is something that needed to be exposed. And look, a lot of us know, watching people who watch this show mainly, you guys know MSNBC is not progressive. MSNBC and Phil Griffin, they're all about making money, and of course money equals access. But nonetheless, Ed was there, and when he was there, that's what he did. He highlighted issues that were important to regular everyday Americans, and he was the only guy that was able to do that. And so, on that network, and it's a surprise that he lasted that long there. So, like I said before, he did live a life well lived, a progressive champion, and he will, of course, be missed. So, thank you for all those years of service, Ed, and we won't forget what you did for the progressive community as we continued to carry on the fight for progressive values. I'm so bad at these. But, okay. Okay. Moving on. So we have an update over the boycott of Walmart, or what was supposed to be a boycott of Walmart. Apparently, that is over pretty much before it began, as Walmart has decided to pull this clothing over outrage from conservatives. Now, according to CNN, the retailer said on Tuesday that it was pulling the clothing from its website in response to a tweet from conservative commentator Ryan Fournier, who questioned his 500,000 followers why Walmart was selling these items. Maybe because we live in a capitalist system and you sell things that people want. There are a lot of people that actually do want to impeach President Trump, or at least wanted to make it known that they would support impeaching President Trump. Now, Let me go to his tweet here. He said, Walmart, why are you selling Impeach 45 baby clothes on your website? What kind of message are you trying to send? How about a message that, hey, there's a sizable amount of people that want this product, so I'm going to go and sell that product. I know it's called business. You guys might have actually heard of capitalism. Maybe. I don't know. But hey, I guess apparently this was a bridge too far for conservatives that had a giant meltdown on Twitter and everywhere else, which is funny because, look, you could say that this is part of free speech, selling these clothes, right? And the company that created this clothes having a deal with Walmart in order to sell them because they were a third party. So Walmart was just like, yeah, third party, you want to go and sell those clothes on our website? Go ahead. And it's their freedom of speech, right? Well, speech and expression, right? So any day now, we should have Dave Rubin saying, oh, you know what? They shouldn't have to stop selling that. They should go ahead and sell that in the stores. I mean, it's free speech and it's free expression, right? No? 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 Yeah, I didn't think so. Their free speech and free expression is all about their free speech and free expression, which, by the way, Walmart sells MAGA stuff and sells all sorts of supposedly controversial things. But again, if it's their free speech, well, we care about that. But when it comes to our free speech, I mean, you know, our free speech is more important than their free speech is what they're saying, or expression. Now, look, the only backlash against clothing being sold in stores that I actually supported was when they had a shirt that said rope tree journalist, some assembly required. It literally advocated for hanging people. I would say that's an incitement to violence, but that's just me. So you could see why some people might be a little upset about that. But of course, an impeachment shirt, well, that's where everybody draws their line, apparently. It's really funny, as I said before, that this is coming from the fuck your feelings crowd. And yet, of course, liberals, no, we're the snowflakes. Right. Okay. But of course, Walmart wasted no time responding to this criticism by saying that though these items were sold by third-party sellers in our open marketplace, which you said you believe in, conservatives, and were not offered directly by Walmart. We're removing these types of items pending review of our marketplace policies. Again, Dave Rubin, where are you? Where are you? You're not going to be here. Of course not. No, here's the thing. Walmart is not a political entity. It's a retailer. And as long as those shirts don't advocate for violence, who cares? They're fine. They should be able to sell them in their stores if they want to. Again, they're selling things like Hillary for President, which is laughable. They also sell the accompanying Stop Hillary shirt, so for balance. And they also sell things like I'm one of the 65 million people, Americans against Trump. But also on the other side, they sell like Dynasty stuff. Look, they're a corporation. They sell stuff. They sell shirts. And as long as those shirts don't advocate for violence, I don't see why they should have to stop selling them. But it's just a few butthurt conservative snowflakes that are like, impeachment, too far, too far. Although I do want to buy that shirt that says that advocates violence against journalists, because they're the fake news anyway. Come on, man. Snowflakes. All of them. Okay. Moving on. So there is a new disastrous poll out from Quinnipiac, and it finds that nearly a majority of Americans think that Donald Trump might be a racist. Now already I can hear the people frantically typing, he's not racist. Donald Trump could never be a racist. You're the racist. You're the real racist. You're racist against white people. Guilty. No, not guilty. Because that's not a thing. You can't actually be a racist against people that are actually in power, because racism actually involves power dynamics. You can be prejudiced against people, but racism, no, it generally has to do with using systems to oppress another minority or a minority. But anyway, that sentiment that, oh no, people who are, that President Trump is not racist is not shared by 49% of American voters who say that Trump is, in fact, yes, a racist. 44% of voters think that racist beliefs were a motive in Trump's immigration policy, while only 50% said Trump has a sincere interest in controlling our borders. And by the way, going back to how many people think Trump is not a racist, that's 47%. So you have a majority of America, the majority of the country, saying, yeah, the guy's a racist. Wonderful. Now, here's the thing, right? And the immigration policy, a majority of people do say Trump has a sincere interest in controlling our borders. I disagree with that. Here's why. He actually has more of an interest in demagoguing Muslims and Mexicans. Why? Because it whips up the base. And look, Trump wants to build a wall because that'll be a monument to President Trump. Oh, look at that. See, I had them build a giant wall, and now it's going to be there forever, even when I'm not president. This man's ego is bigger than any wall. But look, as far as the demagoguing, he whips up the racists, man. And let me give you some examples of statements that he's made in the past that do whip up the racist. For example, his first campaign speech was something about how Mexicans are rapists and criminals. Though some, I assume, are good people. They're good people. Now, he also said things like, Haitian immigrants all have AIDS, and Nigerian immigrants will never go back to their huts in Africa. Now, hearing those statements, if you still say, no, President Trump, he's not a racist at all, you were deeply ignorant. Okay, anyway, let me give you another example, which maybe is not quite as bad. In his remarks to Navajo veterans, he said, you were here long before any of us were here. Although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here long ago, they call her Pocahontas. You're talking to Navajo Indians, and you use a slur against Elizabeth Warren. What? No. Okay. He also asked, why do we want people from shithole countries coming here? Shithole countries. Again, referring to Haiti. So look, those are just a couple of examples. You can go back into his past when he took out an entire page op-ed article in like the New York Times or something to call for the Central Park Five to be executed. This was after they were found to be innocent. Oh, they're innocent. I don't care. I don't care if they're innocent. They're black. They must have done it. Which, by the way, they're not all black. They're mixed minorities. Nonetheless, I don't care. I don't care. Kill them, kill them, kill them. Anyway, execute them. I don't care if they're innocent. I don't care if they've been proven innocent. I hate them. They should be murdered. And of course, the history of not letting certain people of certain races live in his apartments. Yeah, even if they could afford being able to live in those apartments. Look, there is a deep racist history among the Trump family. But as far as some of the stuff he said, it's not a dog whistle. It's a human whistle. It's so loud we can all hear it. Because there's nothing hiding that. It's out in the open. Now look, here's the thing. Trump does that. Yes, because he's racist, but also because he profits politically from it. I mean, look, if you were smart, I guess at least if you were savvy and trying to get PR, and if you were deeply racist, you'd be like, well, look, it's not politically good to say these things, so I guess I'm not going to do that. With Trump, it is a political calculation because it's like, what? The people, they eat it up. This is what regular Americans are thinking. So, and look, they wanted, he's profiting off demagoguing these people to racists and to people who might be economically desperate. And I understand that there are some people that are desperate to blame for the ills of predatory capitalism, but that's not the majority of the people who support him. People, for example, who are more well off voted for Trump by bigger margins than people who are poor. People who are poor actually voted more for Hillary Clinton. So these aren't people that are worried about being displaced by immigrants from their jobs. In fact, let me show you who Trump voters are. A March 2016 NBC survey showed that only a third of Trump supporters had household incomes at or below the national median of about $50,000. Another third made up $50,000 to $100,000, and another third made $100,000 or more. So 2/3 of Trump voters made over $50,000 a year. These voters, a lot of them are solidly middle class or better and well educated and deeply racist. Trump has that vote. Now, that's not to say that everybody who cares about the borders being secure is a racist, but let's get real here. If you're sitting there calling them illegals and you believe that they're getting welfare and all these things, and you believe the propaganda that they're all criminals or rapists and MS-13, then yes, you're either ignorant or racist. And that's just the truth of it. And the truth is, you're actually less likely to be a victim of immigrant crime because they perpetrate less crime than native-born Americans. Now, maybe that's because they actually want to stay here, so they're much more careful. Could be. Or it could be that, like I said before, most people are not criminals. And yes, the some that do get in here and do commit crimes should be deported. Of course they should. And that's violent crimes. But anyway, let me get back to the rest of the poll results here. Now, on the issue of separating children from their parents at the border. So what do they think about that? 60% said the policy of separating children from their parents was a violation of human rights, and the UN would agree. Now, this was a policy that was put in by Trump. This wasn't a policy that was actively enforced by any other administration. In fact, before Trump, the Obama administration did separate families where they believed the child was either in danger, being abused, or possibly being trafficked. So, yes, child separation did happen under the previous administration, although not nearly as much. Now, look, if you're talking deportation, well, deportation, look, President Obama had deported more people than President Bush. Now, here comes Donald Trump to blow that record away because he's got to be better at everything. But anyway, Obama did a lot of things that I didn't agree with, and that, of course, being the deporter-in-chief was one of those things. So on immigration. But let's be fair, he did not come up with this policy. Now, there's one more thing here in this poll that I thought was interesting, and that's the number of Republicans that think that Trump is racist. Like I said, 49% of Americans think Trump is a racist, but when you ask Republicans, the number goes down to 11. 11% of Republican voters say that they think Trump is racist. I wonder how many of those are like, and that's why we voted for him. Because he is racist, because he agrees with us. I'd love to see the polling on that, or the breakdown on how many actually also agree with those policies and agree that, yes, we are racist. But at least you're admitting it, right? Look, let me see here. What's interesting as well about this is that 22% of Republicans also realized that Trump has emboldened racist people to express their beliefs publicly. Now, that's also something that is very, very interesting on here because we've seen a lot of that. In fact, look, since President Trump was elected, we've seen hate crimes rise. In 2017, they rose by 4%. So now the biggest increase is surprisingly or unsurprisingly against Muslims. That rose 19%. Now, what's surprising, and these are FBI statistics, the second largest increase was also against white people. These are hate crimes against white people. Now, that's about 17%. Now, those numbers are incomplete, to be fair. Absolutely 100%. Because it is difficult to get those numbers. And according to the data that we do have, Jews, blacks, and Arabs are actually the recipients of the most hate crimes in America by far. So even though there's been an uptick in hate crimes against white people, I'm not saying that they're the most discriminated. No, by far, black people, Jewish people, and Muslims are discriminated against far more than anybody else. So, at least from Republicans, though, there's a tiny bit of realization that, oh yeah, looks like he's emboldening racists. Now, overall, the poll is pretty disastrous among Republicans, but also among the American people. Kind of shows you that Republicans have done a pretty good job at couching racist language in the ideas of patriotism and national security. Oh, no, we're just securing the borders. Who are you securing it against? Brown people. Because we're not securing the borders against white immigrants. In fact, President Trump himself is like, why don't we get more immigrants from Norway? I'm cool with those guys. Why would anybody from Norway want to come here? Norway has, first of all, Medicare, a version of Medicare for all, so that's single-payer health care. They have excellent education systems. They're the happiest country on earth. Why the hell would they want to come here? No, they wouldn't want to immigrate here. But there are people that are living in terrible, horrific circumstances and situations that do want to come here because, hey, look, America may not be the greatest country on earth, but it's a lot better than a lot of these places like Honduras and El Salvador, which right now are racked by gang violence and drug violence and government corruption and murders. So when you put that in perspective, it makes sense why immigrants would want to come here. And of course, a lot of people on the conservative side, they don't want that because what they fear, the number one thing, is the browning of America and becoming a minority themselves. So that's why they do this. That's why they come up with these policies. And you have to know that a lot of the Republican policies and many of the politicians are deeply racist. And at the end of the day, would love nothing more than to just keep America white. Okay. All right. Moving on. Now, when people talk about racists or neo-Nazis and white supremacists, they generally envision somebody from, say, maybe the South, right? Somebody like your garden variety racist would be somebody who's like got chewing tobacco, a mullet, wearing a Confederate flag hat, and spitting into a cup. So that's a pretty generalized impression of that. And then, of course, you think of white supremacists as people who are skinheads with Nazi tattoos and etc. But in reality, racism can actually take any form. Now, I want you to consider Michael Mazelis. Now, Michael Mazelis is a well-educated, very well put together doctoral student with a very lucrative job with a prominent defense contractor, Northrop Grumman. So this guy is not somebody that you would consider to be a white supremacist. However, that's exactly what he is. Well, how do we know? Well, it's because ProPublica and Frontline have been looking into the leaders of some of the white supremacist groups that took part in the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. Now, that, of course, is the rally which erupted into violence between neo-Nazis and fascists and people who are protesters or anti-fascists, and one person was unfortunately killed. That was Heather Heyer. She was a protester that was run down when a neo-Nazi ran his car into a group of protesters. Now, they've been looking into these groups, and especially one called the Rise Above Movement. Now, that group, of course, is your standard white supremacist group that hates Muslims, non-white immigrants, and, of course, Jews. Because, of course, you can't have a ultra-right-wing rally without hating Jews. Anyway, now the groups were able to quickly identify a number of the group's leaders and found evidence that put them into the middle of the violence in Charlottesville, as well as Berkeley, among other places. Now, Mazelis, however, was a bit more difficult to locate because he didn't fit the standard profile of what we would think would be a white supremacist. Now, in a video shot in Charlottesville, there was a bearded husky man that was seen in a red Make America Great Again hat. Now, his hands were wrapped up in tape, boxing tape, which is what, of course, boxers use to protect their hands when they go and punch other people. Now, when you wrap your hands in that tape to go to a rally, you would expect, it would seem that you're expecting a little bit of violence, right? Well, that's saying that he was basically there to fight, which is exactly what he did. During one encounter, the man, who was first unidentified, pushed an African-American protester to the ground and began beating him up. Video of the episode shows moments later, a known RAM member had also choked and bloodied a pair of female counter-protesters. Now, that member was found to be Mazelis, using video footage and social media posts, as well as reporters who were on the ground, confirming his identity through an encounter with him outside of his home. So they found out that, oh, this guy who was in this video assaulting an African-American protester was actually Michael Mazelis. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on him first. He's a 29-year-old who is pursuing a PhD in UCLA's aerospace engineering program. So he seems like a pretty intelligent person, right? At least academically. Although I don't think he's all that intelligent, because for some reason he just can't tell the difference between black people and white people, and can't tell that they're the same on the inside. Now, in addition to his pursuits in education, Mazelis works as a system engineer for Northrop Grumman, as a giant defense contractor with a plant in California. Now, when approached by ProPublica and Frontline in front of his home in Lawndale, Mazelis said, I don't know anything about what happened in Charlottesville. I wasn't there. I think you got the wrong guy. And then he drove off. However, they, through different social media and through video, as well as from testimony from law enforcement officials, that is the guy. Mazelis is a member of the Rise Above movement. So, now the problem here is that, yes, he's a white supremacist, but he also has security clearance working for Northrop Grumman. Now, those security clearances are typically issued in a two-step process. Now, the Federal Office of Personnel Management conducts an investigation into the individual. The agency's findings are then forwarded to a special unit within the Department of Defense, which makes the final determination on whether the person should receive security clearance. Now, security clearance, of course, grants people access to classified or otherwise sensitive material concerning national security. So this guy, who is a violent white supremacist and part of a violent white supremacist group, has security clearance, has access to national security information that is classified. What? How? How does he still have that clearance? Apparently, the government or Northrop Grumman don't actually care. In fact, the company has taken no action against Mazelis, who remains employed. A violent white supremacist still having a job at a defense contractor with security clearance. That is incredibly problematic. Incredibly problematic. Now look, RAM, I mentioned that before, right? The Rise Above movement. According to the FBI, in previous investigations done by journalists, RAM is considered one of the most violent white supremacist groups in America. And what they do is they urge their members to go and get training in hand-to-hand combat as well as in law enforcement. So, look, that is also deeply problematic, because now you have people with this racist ideologies that are inside the government. And in fact, we already know from previous reports that they actually have a pretty big presence within the military branches as well. People like that should not have a level of power. So there's two takeaways from this, right? Number one, racist can be just about anybody. The stereotypes are actually wrong. You can be somebody who is very well educated, very well put together, and look like a everyday regular person, and still be a horrific person on the inside. It doesn't matter your background or your education or your income. People can become racist. And of course, the other takeaway is that they are inside the government and they have power. And if that isn't scary, it should be. Okay. They need to fire this guy. Pronto. All right. Anyway, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We have disastrous news about medications. We have also another indictment of our healthcare system. And then if we've got time for it, who's making Donald Trump's 2020 flags? Come back with that story. So stay right here. We'll be back in a minute. Oh, and make sure to like and share. Also, if you have a super chat, go ahead and use the super chat and send me a message and we'll read it after the break. All right, we'll be back. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation, right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Just reading tweets about Ed Schultz. So, yeah, a lot of us have had a lot of really, really great things to say about Ed. And, great progressive fighter. He will be absolutely missed. Okay. So before I get into the rest of the stories, I do have a super chat here. Coffee Crow asks some advice. Ooh, advice. I love giving out unsolicited or solicited advice. What sort of advice would you give people trying to expand their channels? Aside from community engagement and having other pages, with YouTube clamping down on indie content, it's far more difficult. Starting on YouTube is very difficult to begin with. It was actually hard before the clamping down. So a lot of people might not remember, and some of you actually do. I've been doing this back in 2013. And even then, it was very difficult to break through. So I guess the biggest advice that I would give is to be consistent and to stay consistent. Because you will be preaching to 2 to 3 people watching your stream for years before it gets to a point of where it's, even as big as me, and I'm not all that big. So I'm actually one of the small guys on the network. So consistency is definitely key. You got to keep putting out content and good content and stuff that people will engage with and will enjoy. So that's like the biggest thing. And a personal advice would be, don't look at your numbers. Don't look at how many people are watching or how many people have watched, or, if you're trying to create a career out of this, which I'm not sure if you are, but if you are, don't ever look at your numbers, because it's going to drive you crazy. And that's a piece of advice that Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk had given me. He said, look, you're going to drive yourself crazy if you look at the numbers. You have to be in this, even if you're the only one that you're talking to. Even if you have nobody watching you, you still have to, love this job enough to just talk to yourself about these issues. And so it takes a mindset, a special mindset, to do something like this, because that it's very, very, very difficult to break through and to have people that actually listen to you. So it's stay consistent, stay with it, and don't worry about people watching. Don't worry about numbers so much, and just be consistent. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Now, wait a minute. Are we getting some breaking news here? I'm seeing that there could be some breaking news. Hold. Holy shit. That is true. Breaking news. Scott Pruitt has just resigned. I don't have any information other than he is gone. He has just resigned from the EPA as head of the EPA, likely to do with probably a lot of the scandals, which is very interesting. I mean, look, he's been getting a lot of information for buying things like $1,500 tactical pants, which I had no idea that there was such a thing. Tactical pants? This is a fancy way of, I guess, having cargo pants. And wasting all sorts of taxpayer money on so many different things. I guess maybe he was either tired of being covered negatively, or maybe Donald Trump might have had an issue with him getting so many headlines. I don't know. But I do know that Pruitt was emblematic of the swamp. And actually something that Laura Ingraham, I believe it was Laura Ingraham, that said on Twitter, she said Pruitt is the swamp. Now, when you have somebody on the right that is calling them out, and Ana Navarro also saying the same thing, although she is a Trump critic, but a conservative as well, pointing out that Scott Pruitt is the swamp. Oh, that's huge news. That's huge. because now you have conservatives that are you're making the rest of us look bad because your grift, your theft is so brazen and open. And so I'm hoping that is the reason why he has decided to step down, or maybe he just ran out of stuff to steal. Who knows? But nonetheless, it's actually a pretty good thing, although I wouldn't get too excited because anybody who replaces Pruitt, of course, has to be chosen by Donald Trump, which means it's very likely we're going to get somebody who still is a climate denier, who is still destroying the EPA and environmental regulations. But at least he won't steal from us. Hooray! Okay. Just had to mention that. And thank you guys for letting me know in the chat that there is this breaking news. Okay. Anyway. Moving on. We can talk more swampy behavior. Oh. I'm sure you guys all remember when the Trump administration had promised to go after prescription drug manufacturers in order to get them to lower the price. I mean, look, everybody's been saying, has said before, even President Trump, these prices, they're getting away with murder. Look at how expensive it is for drugs. President Trump even went after Martin Shkreli. So this, of course, is Pharma Bro, who raised the price of drug by like 6,000%, or some insane astronomical number, from $2 a pill to like $700 a pill. Insanity, right? Well, in an unsurprising twist, after all that, pharmaceutical company Pfizer announced for the second time that it will not lower prices, but it will raise prices instead. In fact, around 100 of Pfizer's drugs got higher list prices this week, according to the Financial Times. Now, those affected drugs include big sellers such as Lyrica pain capsules, Chantix smoking cessation medication, Norvasc blood pressure pills, and the lung cancer treatment Xalkori. Now, those went up about a little less than 10%, but nonetheless, this is the second round of increases. Now, in fact, while many of the price changes in the individual rounds hover at about 10%, many at 9.4%, the hikes collectively boost many drugs' prices by double digits for the year overall. So we have a double-digit increase in the price of prescription drugs. Many of them, of course, are popular prescription drugs that a lot of people need. Now, going back to Trump's promise to lower prescription drug prices, I find this very interesting. Again, I thought the president was supposed to do something about this, and that he was urging Congress. Look, Ted Cruz, for all the shit that I give Ted Cruz for being a wax figure made come to life, Ted Cruz was like open to importing cheaper drugs from Canada. So, and by the way, they're the same quality of the drugs that are manufactured here because they're owned by the same companies, except that they manufacture them overseas and then they send them here. So they would have been cheaper because they would have been from Canada. So anyway, now on Trump's promises, in fact, back in May, he said that he claimed that, don't worry, guys, we're going to do something about these prescription drug prices by letting the companies, I'm going to help them out, and then they're going to voluntarily lower their prices. He said, I think we're going to have some big drug companies in 2 weeks that they're going to announce, because of what we did, they're going to announce voluntary massive drops in prices. That's what he said. Where are the drops? Where'd they go? That was back in May. Oh, a couple weeks, they're going to drop their drug price. No, they didn't. They raised it, and they've been raising it ever since. Look, you think a company, out of the goodness of their heart, is going to voluntarily lose profit by cutting their own prices when a promise given to President Trump, oh no, trust me, we're going to do something. Sucker. No, we're not going to do that because it's profit. That's money in our pockets. Why would we take money out of our pockets voluntarily to help consumers? We don't care about consumers. Ugh. No, We're going to jack the price up of life-saving drugs, and you're going to take it because what's your other option? You're going to die without some of these drugs. Lung cancer medication. I know one of them is Viagra. Nobody's going to die without Viagra. However, you are going to die if you don't have lung cancer treatment medication. It's disgusting, man. Disgusting. Look, the thing is that this is not new. This is happening, yes, under Trump, but I can't blame Trump for it. What I'm blaming Trump for is promising to do something about it and then not doing anything about it. What can I do? No, the real fault, of course, lies with Congress. Now, look, Congress, you got to look how much in legal bribes the pharmaceutical industry gives Congress. In the 2016 cycle alone, pharmaceutical companies gave $16 million to Republican candidates. Now, those are Republicans, right? $16 million in campaign bribes to politicians. But wait, they also gave a pretty significant amount to the Democrats in Congress as well. Around $13,115,345. That is in the 2016 election cycle. So a lot to Republicans and slightly less, but still a very significant amount going to the Democrats. And this is why we have drug companies that continue to raise their prices. Even after PharmaBro, even after Mylan getting in trouble for raising the price of the EpiPens for something that costs like $1 to make, they charge $600 for 2 of them. It's insanity. It's insanity. And it's all done on for profit. And they get away with it because Congress is bought. Cory Booker, for example. Cory Booker was against importing cheaper drugs from Canada. Why? Oh, no, they're lower quality. No, they're the same quality because they're the same drugs. Only they come from somewhere else, and you can actually purchase them cheaper. But we're not going to do that. Congress also could allow Medicare to negotiate the prices for prescription drugs, but they don't want them to. Why? It's because of the money. It's the money. Look, just this year alone, 2018, they've given over $4 million in legal bribes just this year. And it's going to be so much more as the midterms continue to get closer. There's a reason that despite the outrage from many Americans that this kind of stuff still happens. And why our politicians won't do a goddamn thing about it. Follow the money. If anybody thinks that they're going to voluntarily lower those prices because you do something good for them, they're not. You're an idiot. It's just like a politician or maybe your talk show host like Dave Rubin saying that, oh, no, don't worry. We don't need regulation because companies will just regulate themselves in the free market. It's never happened in the history of the entire human species. And it won't because of the money. You keep allowing companies to bribe politicians, and you can keep expecting them to put corporate profits first, because that's exactly what they're going to do. Okay. Alrighty. Moving on. Should be our last story of the day here. Now, in what is very emblematic of the way that we in America do healthcare, there was a woman who was badly injured, but was begging people not to call her an ambulance. Now, why? What does that have to do with the healthcare system? Well, she knew that she could not afford that ambulance. Now, commuters, of course, had rescued a Russian woman who was unnamed after she became stuck in a gap between the train and the subway platform. Now, the incident occurred on Friday at the Massachusetts Avenue station, according to a police report. So, like that, people get stuck in between that gap. Mind the gap, right? Now, what happened? is her foot got stuck in this 5-inch gap, and she suffered a deep laceration, which left her leg twisted and bloody, and there was even a bone that was sticking out in the thigh. So she was in a massive amount of pain, being stuck. In fact, you had people trying to get her out, trying to rock the train back and forth in order to get her foot unstuck. And throughout that entire thing, she pleaded with people who were around her, whatever you do, do not call an ambulance. Don't call an ambulance. Now, when somebody's like, well, why? Why don't you want us to call an ambulance? You need 911. You need medical attention. Here's what she said. Do you know how much an ambulance costs? It costs $3,000. I can't afford that. I can't afford that. Somebody sobbing and through screams of pain because her bone is literally sticking outside of her body. And she said, I can't afford medical attention. I can't afford an ambulance. I only make so much. I only have so much in my bank account. I can't afford this. Just get me out. And then I'll go and figure something out. I'll tape it up or something. You can't do that when you need medical attention. But this is what people are reduced to here in America with our for-profit healthcare system. We're reduced to saying, look, I know I'm injured. Something could happen. And something already did happen. And I'm in an incredible amount of pain. But I can't afford it. I just don't have the money to cover it. And I don't want to go bankrupt due to a medical bill. It's heart-wrenching, man. You know, right-wingers, and I've been getting into discussions a lot, thanks to the win by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, how she's a democratic socialist, believes in socialized medicine, Medicare for all. I get in discussions with right-wingers that are like, socialism is immoral. This is so immoral, right? And it's reprehensible, socialism in any form. Now remember, Medicare is a socialist program. So you pay into it, and so does everybody else. And look, throughout that, throughout your life, there is a good chance that later on in life, you pay into Medicare, you're going to get back more than you put in. Then it ceases to be an entitlement at that point and becomes a socialized system. Because, look, you'll need that medical care, and you put in, say you only put a certain amount in from your taxes, only work so often, or even if you work a very long time and you have a very expensive disease to treat or a very expensive medical condition, odds are you're going to get back more than you put in. So where does that extra money come from? It comes from the taxpayers. It comes from everyone else. That's a socialized system. But the good thing, there are a lot of positives about a socialized system. It has no profit incentive, which means you have a lower overhead of costs, which means it's actually generally cheaper to cover everybody because, look, not everybody needs as much medical attention throughout their lives. But it's good to have in an emergency. And it also, it also incentivizes you to get preventative care, which can stop problems from becoming costly. It actually saves money. It actually would save, if we switch to a Medicare for all system now, we would save $17 trillion. Not immediately, but over a long period of time, we would save over $17 trillion. But instead, what we have is for-profit healthcare, right? Which allows situations like this. I mean, how can you look at this situation or watch the video and make an argument that what we have is more moral than doing a Medicare for all system and basically mandating that everybody pay in through their taxes? A little bit of an extra bump in taxes. And look, you don't even need that with all the money that we would end up saving into having taxpayer-funded healthcare. I mean, we need that so that we don't have people that would have to beg and plead people to not call an ambulance when you have a bone sticking out of your skin. when your leg is twisted and bloody inside of a rail. And look, just because she didn't call an ambulance doesn't mean that she could afford what came next. That injury required massive surgery, which again is something that people can't afford. Adding a $3,000 hospital bill, or not hospital bill, but ambulance bill on top of that, is more than anything than a lot of people can afford. And there's a related story, which a family was charged $47,000 for an air ambulance bill for their child. And make no mistake, this isn't just people who are uninsured, by the way. Now, we don't know if this woman was insured or if she was uninsured, but even with insurance, that family that had to have their child airlifted, $47,000. You know how much insurance paid out of it? $5,000. Insurance companies aren't your friend. They make money by paying out the least amount in claims as they can. So anybody who's defending this system, realize that the insurance companies and the way the system is set up is for these companies to make money. And they make money by actively working against your best interests. Their best interest is to have you paying in as much as possible and taking out as little as possible, because that's how they make profit. They will deny your claims. They will pay as little as possible. Whereas if we had a single payer system, you would be covered. Nobody in other modern countries has this issue. Okay? And it's because they have a socialized healthcare system. No one would ever dream of, for example, in London, of ever seeing somebody beg to not have an ambulance come get them because they can't afford it. But this is something that we do here in America. And it's gross. And it's deeply, deeply immoral. And if you defend this system, then you're defending a system that is against you. We've got to change this. We have to guarantee health care for all Americans through a Medicare for all single-payer system. It saves money. It saves you money. It guarantees better health care outcomes for everyone. It is the right thing to do. It is the moral thing to do. It is the fiscal thing to do. So let's do it already. Medicare for all. Okay. That's it. So, that's all I've got for the show today. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, please give us a like and share. Thank you for the super chats. Those of you who want to help the show, you can also go through our Patreon page, patreon.com/TYTNation. I'm also going to be working with Get Vocal. So we're going to try and do a preliminary stream on Sunday. So I'm going to have a couple of my rowdy friends there. And we're going to have a discussion. I'm not sure what on yet, but I'm sure it will be rousing. So stay tuned to my social media, Jeff's Politics or at TYTNation. And I may actually route it through YouTube if I can figure it out, so that you can watch that conversation and then hopefully sign up for Get Vocal and chime in on our conversation. So that's going to be fun. That's on Sunday. But don't worry, tomorrow we'll be back with a brand new show right here, TYT Nation. Great stories. We'll be taking suggestions, of course, as always. So check me out on Twitter. Please subscribe, like, and share our videos. And remember, love you guys, and change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.